At Los Angeles Airport, flight attendants Jenny and Paula are preparing for their next flight. Captain Forrest and co-pilot Wilsey are chatting with them, and they all realize that tonight's flight will be empty due to the storm. Wilsey also has to take medicine because he is not feeling well. When the flight attendants meet the passengers, they begin to notice some special characters on this flight. George, a teenager who often flies alone, doesn't like to be disturbed. Bev is traveling with her husband, Dr. Kingston, who has Parkinson's disease and is unable to move or speak. Shyla, a military medic, appears worried about flying, while Louise is relaxing with her cat. Niall and Susan, a couple expecting their first child, are very afraid of germs, so they carefully wipe down their seats before sitting. Forrest and Nika are eager foreign tourists, but do not speak English well. Henry is carrying a cage full of hamsters. When Ralph tried to help him place the cage in the overhead compartment, he was bitten by a rat. Because the cage didn't fit, the flight attendants forced Henry to check the hamster cage into the cargo hold. Meanwhile, businessman Preston kept sneezing, seemingly having the same illness as Wilsey. As the plane took off, Jenny had to remind Niall to turn off his phone. He refused, and Henry forced him to comply, making both of them angry and argue. Jenny intervened, threatening both of them that they could be arrested when the plane landed if they didn't maintain order. Then, Henry took the opportunity to flirt with Jenny, bragging about his PhD and commenting on the decline of society today. Not long after, Henry checked the news and discovered that the CDC was locking down a building in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Ralph was feeling unwell, asked for a glass of water, and stared at the wound on his finger. Jenny noticed Ralph sitting in an unusual position and went over to check, but just then he suddenly vomited all over her. His mouth foamed with white bubbles as he screamed to be let off the plane. The flight attendants did their best to handle the situation, but no one noticed that Louise's cat was sneaking around and licking up the vomit on the floor. Jenny handed Ralph over to Paula and quickly went to clean herself up, but as she stepped into the aisle, Ralph suddenly rushed toward her and knocked her down. He furiously banged on the cockpit door, shouting to stop the plane. Wilsey, following protocol, immediately locked the door, while Forrest alerted ground control about the situation. Henry tried to stop Ralph, but was quickly overpowered by him. George unfortunately shared the same fate. In the chaos, Preston, George, Paula, Shyla, and Henry teamed up to subdue Ralph, eventually taking him down and tying his hands with plastic restraints. After things calmed down, Sheila checked to ensure no one was injured, while Jenny hid in a corner, panicked by the feeling that she had failed in the emergency situation. She confessed to Paula that she hadn't been able to do anything useful. At that moment, Forrest announced that the plane had been ordered to make an emergency landing and instructed everyone to return to their seats. The plane shook violently as it descended, and the flight attendants instructed passengers to lower their heads in case of impact. However, Ralph's body slid across the floor, his head repeatedly striking, forcing Jenny and Paula to struggle to pull him into a seat. While Paula fumbled with the seatbelt, Ralph suddenly woke up with bloodshot eyes and bitter nose, causing serious injury. Ralph went berserk, forcing the passengers to once again team up to shove him into the restroom and lock the door. Sheila quickly used the emergency first aid kit to inject medication to prevent Paula from going into shock, and wrapped a cloth around her face to stop the bleeding. However, Paula had lost a lot of blood and needed immediate medical attention. Forrest felt frustrated as ground control insisted on waiting, even though they were aware of the urgent situation. Unable to wait any longer, he decided to break protocol and directed the plane to an unscheduled gate. Luckily, Ed, a baggage handler, noticed the plane approaching and managed to open the gate just in time. Meanwhile, Forrest and his colleagues held the restroom door tightly to prevent Ralph from escaping, while the passengers quickly left the plane in chaos. But Bev and Kingston have to stay behind because they need help changing directions. Ed guided the group to another gate, but the door was locked and no one responded when he called through the radio. With no other options, they had to follow Ed through the staff entrance to reach the airport staging area. The group went down the stairs and Ed reached other doors. However, he was shocked to find all of them locked, something that had never happened before. When checking the control panel, Ed confirmed that they were in lockdown and all their actions were being recorded by security cameras that were still active. A debate broke out about what to do next, but it was suddenly interrupted by the sound of an alarm. Looking through the window, they saw ambulances and police cars parked outside, but the windows were quickly covered. A voice came over the intercom announcing that the group had been isolated and would have to wait for support. The passengers called their families to explain the situation, then vented their frustration on Jenny, treating her as the representative of the airline's decisions. Jenny didn't know how to defend herself, but luckily, Shyla interrupted the argument and reminded them that she had a medical kit in her luggage, which could help Paula hold on for a few more hours. Jenny led Ed and a few passengers to search for Shyla's luggage. However, at that moment, the entire power system was cut off. Ed used a flashlight to guide the way, and when they returned to the plane, they discovered that Wilsey and Forrest had disappeared. Jenny opened the restroom door and was horrified to see blood splattered everywhere. Preston moved to retrieve his laptop and accidentally bumped into Kingston, who was sitting alone. His wife had vanished, and when the others asked what had happened, Kingston merely glanced at a pair of plastic handcuffs on the floor, chewed through. Meanwhile, Ed cut the carpet on the floor to open a hatch, leading them directly to the cargo hold. Jenny grabbed Shyla's medical kit, while Niall took out a gun from his suitcase. Ed was startled when he saw a rodent run past his feet, chased it away, and said it was a rat. But Henry thought it was just one of his hamsters, as he had found the broken cage. When Jenny climbed out of the cargo hold, she looked around and discovered Preston's laptop, covered in blood, at the end of the hallway. Suddenly, Wilsey appeared, running swiftly, growling, its body also covered in blood. At that moment, Forrest, now infected, suddenly appeared behind Jenny and attacked her. The men immediately rushed to help, but their punches had no effect. Finally, Niall was forced to shoot Forrest dead, but some of Forrest's blood splattered on his face. Afterward, the group ran off the plane and into the gate area. They found Kingston thrown out of his wheelchair and Preston unconscious with a deep bite on the back of his neck. Nearby, Jenny saw Bev crying, pleading for help, but suddenly Bev transformed and lunged to attack. Luckily, Jenny ran faster and managed to escape, while the others shut the door to trap Bev outside. The group returned to the others, with Shyla trying to care for Paula, while Susan wiped the blood off Niall's face. Despite the tense situation, they still shared a kiss. Henry and Ed stacked luggage to block the door and prevent Bev from getting in. Jenny walked around to check and discovered bloodstains on the floor, worried about where they came from. Finally, Jenny lost her composure, shouting for everyone to be quiet, and took charge, as the captain was dead. Shyla explained that this wasn't a known disease, and Jenny recalled the building mentioned on the news, which had also been put into lockdown. At that moment, Kingston noticed a rat with glowing red eyes nearby. Though he tried to warn them, he could only groan softly, and no one paid attention. The rat suddenly fell onto Kingston's head and bit him before George knocked it off. Meanwhile, the others quickly caught the rat and locked it in a bucket. Sheila bandaged the wound, and then the group agreed to lock Kingston and Paula in a sealed container to prevent them from possibly transforming. Ed, wearing gloves, caught the rat and noticed a tag on its leg, indicating it had escaped from a laboratory. George immediately accused Henry, saying he had brought the rat on board and lied about the hamsters, as he was sure he had seen long tails in the cage earlier. Henry denied it, but Jenny pulled him aside and demanded the truth. Henry swore he hadn't done it, explaining that laboratory rats couldn't pass security checks. As the two hugged for comfort, Ralph suddenly appeared and lunged at Jenny, ignoring Henry's attempts to stop him. Jenny's scream made the others rush to help. The group worked together, using a pipe to choke Ralph to death. At that moment, Ed received a message via radio informing him that the CDC team had arrived. The group quickly gathered at the exit, hoping for rescue. However, 4 CDC personnel entered. Instead of letting them out, these individuals aimed guns at the group, restraining them while taking the rat and confiscating Niall's gun. The CDC personnel then approached Paula and Kingston to administer an injection. The group demanded an explanation, but the personnel only said it was mandatory protocol. They continued to ask the others to agree to receive the injection. Everyone hesitated, so Louise volunteered to take the shot first. However, just before the needle could be administered, her cat suddenly bit Louise on the neck and ran off. One of the personnel fired to shoot the cat, but missed entirely. Immediately after, Kingston began to transform and lunged at one of the CDC personnel. The other personnel quickly shot Kingston down and tried to drag their injured colleague outside, only to find the door locked. They were forced to shoot at the door to break it open and run outside. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Forrest decided to lead Nika to chase him. However, the police immediately opened fire and killed him, while a CDC employee was fortunately only shot in the leg. At that moment, they heard the growling of the infected approaching. With no other choice, they ran into a container to hide. Susan stopped when she noticed Niall foaming at the mouth, causing everyone to pull her inside. They explained that Niall had also been infected, After locking the container door, Shyla pointed out that each injection had a different color, meaning everyone was receiving different types of drugs, not just the standard procedure as they were told. Henry revealed he had taken the gun and forced the officer to confess what he knew. It turned out the officer wasn't from the CDC, but was from the CBDT, Chemical, Biological Domestic Terrorism Organization, operating under the Department of Homeland Security. A unit from their organization had visited an apartment in LA a few hours ago, but no one had left there. They had attempted to develop a cure based on a survivor, but it only made things worse. This implies that their group would be the next human experiment. After confirming that the rats carried the pathogen, the officer retrieved his gun from Henry and committed suicide. Nika broke down, while Ed recalled that the area was frequently flooded due to an old drainage pipe, meaning they could escape if they found it. Suddenly, Wilsey appeared from a gap at the top of the container and grabbed Ed's hand. Henry was about to shoot him, but realized his gun was out of bullets. Ed ordered George to press the button to lift the container, crushing Wilsey against a steel beam. After that, the group left the container, and Ed led them through to a safe area. When Jenny noticed Henry had disappeared, Nika was trailing behind, and suddenly something dragged her away from the group. The group quickly ran up the stairs to escape. Henry was opening a bag containing another gun. As the group ran, Jenny tripped and discovered that Paula had also transformed. Jenny was forced to accept that her friend was lost, and she used a wrench to fight the monster, pushing it off the floor and killing Paula. Afterwards, the group entered an office and searched for the station's blueprints, finding a passage through a wall that led to the drainage pipes. Meanwhile, George revealed that he had taken Henry's bag and found suspicious documents detailing the experiments in the lab, along with a mysterious box. At that moment, Susan and Anil found them and tried to attack, but Henry returned just in time and shot both of them dead. Ed noticed Henry had been bitten, and George seized the opportunity to open the box, revealing a pile of drugs and a syringe. Finally, Henry admitted that he had brought the rats and explained that he was part of the cult the officer had mentioned. Their goal was to cleanse the planet of humans, who were becoming increasingly violent and destructive. Henry threatened to kill Jenny if George didn't give him the antidote. At this point, Ed rushed in to stop him, but was immediately shot dead by Henry. The rest were scared and gave Henry the antidote. He mixed the drug with blood from his wound and injected it into his eye, explaining that his group had agents in many organizations, and that was how he managed to smuggle the rats through security. Now, Henry prepared to leave and intended to take George as a hostage. Jenny tried to stop him, but Henry pushed her down and escaped with the child. While Jenny felt dizzy from the vertigo, Shyla stepped forward. A few minutes later, Jenny went outside and encountered Preston, who had transformed. A chase ensued. Preston almost caught up with her, but Jenny managed to kick him away and lure him into a machine, using a manhole cover to strike Preston's head until he died. Afterward, Jenny continued searching for George, but had to take a different path when she saw Nika, who had transformed, standing nearby. She entered another room and unexpectedly met Shyla, who was searching for the police officer's thermal glasses. Shyla handed them to Jenny and revealed she had been bitten, then asked Jenny to find George while she would buy time for her. Shyla returned to the main room, speaking loudly to attract the attention of the infected, and they immediately rushed at her, killing her. Jenny discovered a hole in the wall that Henry had made. Suddenly, Louise grabbed her. Jenny quickly used her strength to strike Louise until she fell. Afterward, Jenny passed through the area between the walls, noticing drops of blood on the floor. Thanks to the thermal glasses, she was terrified when she saw a few creatures, but fortunately, they were just rats, not lab rats. Following the blood trail, Jenny found the blueprint in Henry's jacket, next to a ladder leading down to the drainage pipe. She looked down and discovered George. He explained that the antidote had no effect, and Henry had also transformed. Although George warned her, Jenny still went down and noticed blood dripping onto her glasses. Suddenly, Henry appeared and attacked her, causing Jenny to drop the glasses. Henry threw her around, while Jenny tried to hold him back. George, wearing the thermal glasses and holding a gun, shot Henry. Now free, Jenny retrieved the glasses and used the wrench to strike Henry's head to finish him off. At that moment, a huge fire erupted from the basement, signaling that the outside teams were setting the station on fire. The exit was blocked, but Jenny discovered a luggage tunnel and kicked the lid open. So George was too scared to enter, so Jenny handed him the thermal glasses and told him to go ahead to ensure safety. When they heard explosions from outside, they quickly moved forward. However, Jenny began to feel exhausted and realized she had been infected. George turned back and saw her vomiting, but he refused to leave without her. Jenny agreed to keep going with him, only because of him. Eventually, they found the exit, but it was blocked by metal bars. George easily passed through them, and when he turned around, a transformed Jenny charged at him. Fortunately, she was too large to squeeze through the bars, and George managed to escape by removing his coat. In the end, George escaped the airport, while Louise's cat also ran away, heading towards the city. You have just watched the summary of the movie Quarantine 2 Terminal. Please subscribe and turn on notifications to watch the next videos. Thank you for watching.